Okay, now we're going to proceed to making pasta. Typically I just like to buy it and use it out of the box, but there are times when you want to make homemade pasta because it's fun and it gets your hands involved in something that you remember growing up with. I can remember my grandmother making pasta all the time by hand and cutting everything by hand. We're going to make two different types. We're going to make an eggless pasta, which is what you would typically buy in boxed pasta. It's just a semolina and flour-based pasta with water, oil, and salt. And then we can make an egg-based pasta, which is what you typically would see when you see fettuccine. It's a little richer, and it does have a different texture than the eggless pasta. So we're going to start with the eggless pasta, and that means I don't need the eggs, so I'll put them aside. And what I do need is flour, oil, salt, and water. That's all. By the way, I have cornmeal here, which I will use later in the process when we actually start making the pasta cuts. So I'm going to set that aside with the eggs. So I will use Italian flour, 00, which is a very fine flour, and semolina, or semola flour. These are both made in Naples by a company called Caputo. It's one of the most famous and probably most popular flours used in Italy. Where do you get them? You can get just about anything you want if you really want to look for it on Amazon, including oils and all different types of ingredients. So I take advantage of it and I don't have to go to the store to buy it. Can you use regular flour? Yes, you can. You don't need these. My grandmother didn't use these. She used all-purpose flour. Key is unbleached. Don't use bleached flour. Unbleached flour is the way to go, okay, because it gives your dough the proper gluten development and the proper texture. We're going to start with the basic eggless pasta, which is just flour, water, salt, and oil. And what I have here is I have a large mixing bowl, and I'll explain why I use that. In this measuring cup, you can probably see the stratification. I have approximately a cup of 00 flour and a cup and a half of the semolina flour. It amounts to 2.5 cups of flour. Is it plus or minus? Yeah, because it doesn't have to be perfect. What I do is I add this to my bowl. Now typically you would see the old Italian ladies making a well in the center of their table. I don't like to have to clean up that mess. So what I do is I make my well right here. First thing I want to do is I want to add a little salt to this, and you need about a half a teaspoon. I do measure salt and olive oil just so that I don't overdo it. But if you're off a little bit, you're off a little bit. Again, salt with no iodide. Disperse it around the best you can. Not happy with the way it's mixed, mix it together. It's all going to come out in the mix anyway. Now the nice thing about the large bowl is I can make my well right in the bowl. And it's contained and it doesn't go all over my countertop. And if it spills over the sides of the well, I don't care. Now we're going to add the liquid ingredients. I'm going to start with warm water, warm tap water. I put about half of that into the well. Not bad. And then I will add my tablespoon of olive oil. Okay, let's get that out of the way. And now comes the fun part. Getting your hands in here. Start to bring the flour into the center of the well. Mix it with your fingers and don't be afraid. As you do this now, it's going to get pretty clumpy. And this is where you start to judge how much water you actually want to add. I have never had to add more than 1 cup of water to this dough. I had my son Stephen do this one day and he couldn't get over how all of a sudden it made a cohesive dough. And you can see it's starting to get there already. It's starting to clean the sides of the mixing bowl, which is what you want. It's got just enough moisture to pick up most of the flour. You're starting to form the gluten that you're looking for. You can see that this has already formed a pretty nice ball of dough. The nice thing about when it works this way is you can actually clean your bowl. It comes out pretty nicely when you're done. Now comes the fun part. A lot of people go, no, it's not. You got to work this thing. You got to work it and make sure that you're putting your heart and soul into it. It tells people that you've actually wanted to do something nice. It takes anywhere between 5 and 10 minutes of this physical activity to get the dough where you want it to be. You want the dough to be tense. You want to aggravate it. You get that gluten all tight and anxious to relax. It's picked up everything. I'm going to clean my hands while I'm at it too. Get all of that money that you put into this thing into the dough. Waste not, want not. I've cleaned my hands on more than one occasion today. Okay, and we're doing this in the throes of COVID-19, so my hands are probably cleaner than they've ever been in their lives. See, it gives a little spring. You've started to get the gluten developed where you want it. And my mother used to say, you'll know when it's done. You can't over knead it, but you can under knead it. I think we're just about there. You can actually feel the dough changing to where it's not so grainy in your hands anymore. And your hands are actually clean, which means that it's picked up everything. There's enough moisture in there to pick up all the flour, and it's not crumbling on you. Just form it into a ball, best you can. This can rest for about a half hour or a little bit more. If you can actually put this in the refrigerator, refrigerate it for as much as overnight, and be ready to use it when you use it. But when you do, if you take it out of the refrigerator, give it about a half hour to 45 minutes to come back to room temperature. So that's our basic eggless pasta. In a few minutes we'll go on and do our egg-based pasta. To be honest with you, I don't do this very often, so this is a crapshoot today. Let's see how it works. If it goes as well as the other one, we've hit it correctly. What I have here is the flour, which is a 50-50 blend of the Italian 00 and just regular unbleached all-purpose flour. A cup, let's see, it was a cup and 1/3 of each. You can see that I've made my well, and I'm going to take the eggs, 4 large eggs, not extra large, not medium, but large, and give them a quick beat. And the size of the eggs is important because that will determine how much flour you use. So if it calls for large eggs, go with the recipe amounts of flour. If you use extra large, then you're going to have to adjust with more flour. If you use small eggs or medium eggs, you're going to have to go with less flour. So most recipes are based on straight large eggs. I give them a good beat. What I will do now is I will just add a touch of olive oil in here, about 1/4 to 1/2 teaspoon. And a pinch of salt, a good pinch of salt. And I will mix that together. And now comes the fun. Pour the egg mixture into the well. And you can do this with a fork or you can do it with your fingers, whichever way you want to do it. Start incorporating the flour a little bit at a time from the well. And this is where the egg dough is a little different, and you just have to play with it a little differently. Eventually you'll actually use your hands And like I said, I don't do this very often, so I'm just going based on instinct at this point, which is pretty much the essence of Italian cooking. I'm just going to bring it in a little bit at a time until the integrity of the well starts to collapse. And then I'll go in with my hands. Now, will you need more flour? You might when you start kneading. And in that case, what I'll do is I may add semolina flour as my bench flour. Now, there's water set aside here in case the dough is too dry, but you normally wouldn't add water here because your liquid component is the egg. So let's see how that works out for us. Start bringing it together, just like you did with the eggless version. If it doesn't come together in a second or two, and add just enough water to try and bring it together like the last time. You can see that the dough is starting to form into a more cohesive mass. And you know something? A little bit will help. Not a lot. We'll just take it a dribble at a time until it comes together. Like any recipe that involves flour and ingredients of that type, it all depends on the weather you're working with. And today's a dry day, so the flour is going to need a little extra moisture to do its job. If it were a moist day, then there would be moisture in the air, and believe it or not, the flour would actually pick that up. English is my second language, so if I've screwed up here in my use of the English language, I apologize. Why is it my second language? Because my mother and father worked, and my grandmother, my mother's mother, raised me, along with her husband and grandfather. Raised me in the sense that they were home all day while my mother and father worked, and my grandmother was illiterate. She couldn't speak a word of English. So all I knew was the dialect of my parents' hometown, Gaeta. So when I went to school, went to kindergarten at 4 and a half, I couldn't speak English. Didn't take long, and before I knew it, I was interpreting for my teachers and my grandmother, which was kind of a pain because my grandmother was there every day complaining about something. And I had to learn early how to temper her temper. If you want to know how good it is to cook sometimes, do this kind of stuff. Because there's a feeling of satisfaction that you've done something that's different. And you can tell your kids and your family and your friends, hey, I made this myself. I made the pasta. And they're going to say, my, that must have been hard. You just tell them, yeah, it was really tough. It took me 5 hours to make a dough. I think we're there. We're going to do the same thing with this now as we did with the other dough. We're going to make it into a ball, wrap it in plastic, and then we'll do something with it. Very good. Besides, if, we made sauce, might as well have something to go with the sauce. So we have two pastas. What we're going to do is make cavatelli, which is basically little cave. What it is, it's like a gnocchi. It has like a little crevice in it so that the sauce can get caught in there. Now you can make them by hand, by using your fingers, like most of the old-time Italians did, or you can do them the more modern way, with an old-fashioned Italian cavatelli maker, which I purchased in South Philadelphia many years ago. I can't even remember. But I needed something to give to my wife to make gnocchi with. And I found this place in Philadelphia called Junta Brothers. And I used to work in South Philly. So my buddy Mike and I went there. And I found it. And I went to purchase it. And the guy says, $88. I said, okay, here's my credit card. He said, no, we don't do credit cards. So luckily, my buddy Mike, who came from South Philly, actually Southwest Philly, always carried cash, usually in denominations of hundreds. And he was able to lend me $88 for a few minutes until I was able to pay him back the next day. And it's a crank. You can hear the clicking. There's a knife in the mechanism right there. As the dough goes through the rollers, it cuts it and shapes it into the shape of the cavatelli. You can see the grooves here which give the pasta grooves for the sauce to get caught into. So let's get this attached to our countertop. And the trick is to make sure you catch the pasta somewhere. And what I've got is a little glass tray here, glass bowl. Here's the pasta. This is the eggless dough that's been resting for a while. I actually put it in the fridge for a while because it was getting to be over a half hour and I didn't want it to get too soft. Now what you want to do here, you want to cut your dough into pieces. And I'm going to not cut it all, but one piece at a time. Keep it covered so it doesn't dry out on you. The cornmeal is in here also, just to keep the pasta from sticking to itself. And I have trays lined with parchment paper that I will transfer the cavatelli to once they've been formed. And what you want to do is you want to roll your dough out, and it seems to be rolling pretty nicely, into a pencil. Nice little log, about the thickness of a big pencil. It's rolling nicely, which means the dough worked pretty well. And once you get going, this doesn't take that long. It's just, you just have to be patient with it and let it do its thing. And here we go. You stick it between the wooden wheels, turn the crank, and there they come. And those are cavatelli. And sometimes you get a piece of dough that doesn't cut totally, and that's normal. But you can see the little cave and the ridges. I'll toss them in the cornmeal a bit. I'll just spread them out onto the lined cookie sheet. And you get about a pound to about a pound and a quarter from that dough that we made. That's plenty to feed 4 people. Now we'll just keep doing this until we're through with the dough. We're about ready to cook the pasta that we made. As you recall, we laid them out on trays with cornmeal so that they would dry. They've been drying for a little over an hour and a half. That's about right. If you want to freeze them, I would dry them longer. You need to get the cornmeal off of the pasta as best you can. So I use a slotted spoon of some sort. Shake it off. Put it into a colander. We'll finish this off by just shaking. You can see that there's still some coming out. You want something with big enough holes so that the cornmeal will go through, and a nice colander usually does the trick. Now we transfer it over to a bowl that we're going to use to transfer it to the boiling water. First thing you want to do is get a lot of water boiling in each pot. The trick with pasta of any kind is to not use small amounts of water. Use as much water as you can because you want the boiling action to get the pasta moving and cooking. The other thing is you want to salt your water when it boils. And the Italians say the water should be the taste of seawater when you use it. So this is your chance to salt the pasta. After this, you really can't anymore. So now we're ready to roll. I have my eggless pasta here, and I have my egg-based dough pasta here. So we're going to dump them in. You see how they stayed separated? There's one. And you don't want to lose the boil, so what you're going to do is you're going to put your lid back on, cock that way at high heat until it starts to boil again, and do the same thing here. Now fresh pasta tends to cook quickly. So they say that once it comes to the top or it rises to the surface, it's done. Yes and no. It depends on how hard the pasta is when you make it. I probably would say check it at that point. If it still tastes like raw flour, you're not there yet. The other thing we're doing is we have sauce ready to go in 2 skillets. Basically, I put in 4 ladles of sauce in each skillet. just to have them ready to dress the pasta when it's time. And it's been heated up. And here's our master batch, warm and ready to roll should we need more sauce. Now, one last point. Don't over sauce your pasta. The pasta is supposed to be the protagonist in the dish, not the sauce. If you want to add extra sauce, do it after you plate your pasta. But the reality of it is, Italians like to taste their pasta and use the sauce more as an accompaniment to the pasta itself. We're going to keep the pasta water in case we need it. If it's too dry in the pan, we can add a little bit of the pasta water because we're going to finish cooking the pasta in the sauce. That's how you get pasta that's al dente. You undercook it in the water to a point where it's just harder than what you would like it to be. And then from there, you transfer it to the pan with the sauce and finish cooking it in the sauce. And if you need to add some water from the pasta pot, this is the time to do it. Let's check this one. And that way I know which one will cook more quickly. Not bad. This one's a little harder. They've been cooking for about the same time. Now I'll give this another minute on that side, and then we'll probably be ready to toss that one. And then this one will be ready to go. And the texture, as you can see, is they're firm. They're not falling apart. They're holding their shape. And they're doing exactly what they're supposed to do. Okay, I'm going to chance it now. I got the flame up a little bit on the sauce. I'm going to drain it, still with a little bit of the water left on the pasta. Doesn't look like I'm going to need any water here, so I'm going to let the pasta cook a little bit and absorb the moisture from the sauce. Pasta asciutta. You can see it's starting to simmer a little bit. And when it looks creamy, you're about there. Okay, now we finish. Turn off the flame on both of them. Give this a toss. And now we put some cheese on each one. Never add cheese to pasta that's cooking. Turn off your flame. This is pecorino romano. I've chosen this one because it's typical of the southern part of Italy where this pasta is typical and made usually. It's a sheep's milk cheese, which has a very strong smell, odor, but it's very tasty and it's got a saltiness to it like most sheep milk cheeses do. Parmigiano, Reggiano, or even Grana Padano, that's cow's milk cheese. They're milder and they require maybe a little more on the pasta than you would normally put on. I just put a little bit on there to bind the pasta up, and then people can put more on their plate as they wish. This is a good time to add just a little bit of the essence of basil right to the pan. You can get that fragrance of the basil coming off from the hot pasta. You can always add more in the dish, but I like to do it right in here. And the other thing it does is it reminds you of the colors of the Italian flag. And there we are. I have to taste it. If I cooked it, I have to taste it, right? You don't want to give it to your guests when it's no good. So which one should we do first? Eggless, since that's been the one we've been doing first anyway. Chewy. The sauce is very nice. It's sweet on its own without any added sugar. The cheese, of course, gives you that saltiness, and the basil just gives you this beautiful fragrance. The texture is just the way I like it, very al dente. Now let's try this one. A little firmer. You can definitely taste the egg. Very good, both of them. Do I have a choice? Yeah, both. I'd eat either one anytime. So I hope you've enjoyed watching this, and try it at home. It's not that hard. Just make yourself a morning with your dough, your flour, and your water.